Asterisk. Imagine waking up one day to discover that the person closest to you is struggling with something they've been hiding for years. Imagine realizing that your bond with your child is deeper than you ever could have imagined. But what happens when love crosses boundaries that society says are unbreakable? In this powerful and heart-wrenching tale, a father is faced with an unimaginable truth about his son. Are you ready to be moved? Asterisk. Let's dive into the story. Asterisk. I never imagined my life would twist into something I could hardly recognize after what my son revealed when my wife wasn't home. But it turned into the most unforgettable day of my life. It all happened 2 weeks ago. The house was eerily quiet, almost too still for comfort. My wife had left for a business trip early in the morning, a short trip that would last the better part of the week. She kissed me goodbye, gave me a quick hug, and then she was gone, leaving the house to me and my son. My son was 18, tall with messy brown hair and an easy smile that could charm anyone. He was the kind of teenager who was just beginning to step into his own skin, quiet but not awkward, independent but not too distant. I always admired how he navigated the world with quiet confidence, never the center of attention, but always in the background, somehow pulling it all together. That afternoon, he was lounging on the couch, his eyes glued to the screen of his phone, as I prepared lunch in the kitchen. I could hear his occasional chuckles, the sounds of memes or videos that kept him entertained. It was one of those lazy, slow days when nothing significant seemed to happen. But it wasn't long before I realized that this day would be far from ordinary. "Dad," he called out from the living room, pulling me from my thoughts. His voice had a tone to it, something a little different. It was playful, but there was an edge to it that I couldn't quite place. I turned toward him, wiping my hands on a dish towel. "What's up?" He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he shifted on the couch, a subtle change in his posture that piqued my curiosity. There was a mischievous glint in his eyes, something I hadn't noticed before. It wasn't quite the usual look I saw on his face. He wasn't asking for permission to go out or complaining about his homework. No, this was different. "Dad, can I talk to you about something?" he asked, sitting up. His voice was steady, but there was something oddly intense about it. I raised an eyebrow, setting the towel down and stepping toward him. "Sure, what's on your mind?" He glanced down at his phone for a moment before putting it aside on the coffee table, his fingers drumming nervously on the edge. He took a deep breath, clearly trying to muster up the courage for something important. "I've been thinking about something for a while now," he began, looking me in the eyes for the first time in what felt like forever. His gaze wasn't anxious. It was focused and direct. "About us," he stopped, letting the words linger in the air. My heart skipped a beat, my chest tightening. The words weren't sinking in, and my brain scrambled to process the gravity of what he was saying. I'd never seen him act like this before. The usual carefree teenage son had suddenly disappeared, replaced by someone I didn't fully recognize. "What do you mean?" I asked carefully, trying to keep my voice steady despite the growing sense of unease. Noah took another breath, his eyes finally meeting mine. There was something raw, something unfiltered in his gaze. "I've been confused, Dad, about who I am, what I feel." The room seemed to pulse with tension. Everything felt blurry, and I wasn't sure how to respond. Was he talking about something I'd never noticed? Had I missed something? He continued, his voice trembling slightly. "I think I'm different than I thought I was. I think I might be gay." The words hung in the air like a cloud, the weight of them sinking into my chest. It felt like the world around me had stopped, the ground beneath me unsteady. I wasn't sure how to react. My mind scrambled to catch up with what I was hearing. I knew him well. He wasn't someone who made statements like this lightly. And the way he looked at me now, vulnerable and raw, made me realize just how important this moment was for him. This wasn't just saying something offhand. This was a confession, a part of him he had been holding back. I sat down beside him on the couch, trying to steady my breath. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I knew I needed to be calm. "Noah," I began, choosing my words carefully. "You don't have to explain yourself to me unless you're ready. But whatever this is, I want you to know that I'm here. I'm here for you." Noah looked at me, his expression softening, but there was a hint of relief in his eyes. "You're not mad?" I shook my head, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Noah, I'm not mad. I'm your dad. I just want you to be happy and true to who you are." He smiled faintly, but there was a sadness behind his eyes, a lingering uncertainty. "I don't know how to tell Mom," he admitted quietly, and that was the moment I realized the magnitude of what had just shifted between us. It wasn't just about him coming out to me. This was about the rest of his life, the rest of his identity, and the challenges that came with that. How would his mother react? How would the world outside our home treat him? But just as I opened my mouth to offer more reassurance, a thought struck me. A truth even deeper than the surface-level concern for his mom's reaction. There was something he wasn't saying, something just beneath the surface, waiting to emerge. The air between us had shifted, heavier now with the weight of his confession. His words echoed in my mind as I tried to make sense of the magnitude of the moment. We were standing at the crossroads of something new, something I hadn't expected, but also hadn't known how to prepare for. My thoughts were a whirlwind of emotions, concern, confusion, and an overwhelming desire to protect him. But mostly, I felt proud that he had trusted me with this. Noah's gaze lingered on the floor, avoiding my eyes. I could tell he was still processing everything, his mind racing through the uncertainty of the next steps. I wanted to say something that would give him comfort, but the truth was I wasn't sure what I was supposed to feel. The love for my son had always been unconditional, but now there were questions I hadn't anticipated. There was fear too. Fear of the world outside the safety of our home and fear of how others would treat him. For a moment, we both sat in silence. I could hear the distant hum of traffic outside and the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. Time had slowed, and the quiet of the house felt almost suffocating, the kind of silence that makes you question everything. "I didn't want you to find out like this," Noah murmured, breaking the silence. His voice was so quiet, almost as if he was afraid of saying it too loudly, like the weight of his words might collapse the whole world around us. I took a deep breath, trying to gather my thoughts. "Noah," I began, my voice steady yet soft, "you don't have to apologize. This is your journey, and I want you to know that I'm proud of you for sharing this with me." He glanced up at me, searching my face for any signs of judgment, but all I could offer was a reassuring smile. I could see the uncertainty in his eyes, his fear of what was to come, but I refused to let that fear transfer to me. I wanted to be his anchor, the one person he could rely on when everything else seemed uncertain. "Just don't know how to tell Mom," he whispered, his voice trembling as if the words themselves weighed too much. "What if she doesn't understand? What if she thinks I'm just lost or confused?" Lisa wasn't here. She'd left on a business trip just this morning. The house felt quieter, heavier in her absence, and maybe that was why he had chosen this moment to speak up. It was easier to confess something so personal when one less person was listening. I reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. "We don't have to figure everything out today," I said softly. "You'll know when the time is right, and when that moment comes, I'll be right there with you." Noah nodded, but his gaze stayed fixed on the floor. Then slowly, he took a small step closer to me, his movement almost hesitant, as though testing the waters of something unspoken. His eyes flicked up to meet mine, and in them, I saw something I wasn't prepared for, a vulnerability so raw it almost hurt to look at. "Dad," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," I replied, my tone steady even as my heart started to race. He took another step closer, close enough now that I could feel the warmth radiating off him. "Do you ever regret anything, like things you didn't say or do?" The question caught me off guard. "Regret," I echoed, buying myself a moment to think. "I think everyone has regrets, Noah. It's part of being human, but what matters is how we move forward, not what's behind us." He seemed to consider my words, but his eyes didn't leave mine. Instead, they lingered, searching for something I couldn't quite name. There was a softness in his expression, a kind of yearning that made my breath hitch. "It's just," he said, his voice breaking slightly, "I feel like there's so much I've been holding back, and I don't know how to let it out without messing everything up. His words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. I wanted to tell him that nothing he said or did could ever ruin what we had. I wanted to promise him that I would always be his safe place, no matter how complicated things got. But before I could find the right words, he took another step, closing the distance between us entirely. "Dad," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I don't know if I can keep pretending everything's fine." His hand brushed against mine, a fleeting touch that sent a jolt through me. It wasn't the touch itself that unsettled me. It was the intention behind it, the unspoken question he was too afraid to voice. I took a steadying breath, my mind racing. "Noah," I began, my voice as gentle as I could make it. "You don't have to pretend with me. You never have to pretend with me." He nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'm scared, Dad. Scared of what this means. Scared of what people will think. Scared of what you'll think." I reached out and cradled his face in my hands, forcing him to meet my gaze. "Listen to me," I said firmly. "You're the most important thing in the world to me. Nothing you say or do could ever change that. Do you hear me?" He nodded again, a single tear slipping down his cheek. "I hear you," he whispered. For a moment, the room felt suspended in time. The only sounds were the faint hum of the refrigerator and the soft rhythm of our breathing. Then, without warning, he leaned into me, resting his forehead against my chest. I wrapped my arms around him, holding him tightly as if to shield him from the weight of the world. "We'll figure this out together," I murmured into his hair. "Whatever it takes, we'll figure it out." Noah didn't respond, but the way his body relaxed against mine told me everything I needed to know. In that moment, he wasn't just my son. He was someone searching for acceptance, for love, for the kind of reassurance only I could give. As we stood there in the quiet of the house, I realized that this was just the beginning. His journey wasn't one I could predict or control, but it was one I would walk with him every step of the way. Slowly, Noah broke the hug, stepping back just enough to put some space between us. His eyes darted away, lingering on the floor as though the words he wanted to say were written somewhere on the hardwood. I tilted my head, studying him. There was something else. He hesitated but gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. My breath hitched. More? What else could there be? I waited, letting the silence stretch as long as he needed. He fidgeted, his fingers twisting nervously, and I could see the battle playing out in his mind. Whatever it wasn't easy for him to say. Finally, his voice came out quiet and trembling, but every word hit like a thunderclap. The words left his mouth, and it felt as though the ground beneath me gave way. My knees nearly buckled, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. "Dad," he whispered, his voice trembling, "I think I like you more than a son should like his dad." His words, blunt and raw, hit me like a punch to the stomach. I could feel my blood run cold as the words lingered in the air. It was as if the world froze for a second, the room spun, and I felt my head cloud with confusion. This wasn't just about his identity. It was something deeper, something twisted, something I hadn't even been prepared to confront. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My first instinct was to pull away, to deny everything and convince myself that this was just some phase, some confusion he'd eventually grow out of. But the hurt in his eyes, the vulnerability that was raw and unfiltered, stopped me. I placed my hand on his shoulder, trying to steady both of us, try to find some kind of calm amidst the storm swirling inside me. "Noah," I started, my voice shaky but deliberate. "I love you. I always will. But this..." The words caught in my throat, heavy and unsteady. My mind grappled to make sense of what I just heard. He looked at me, his eyes searching mine for an anchor, a lifeline. There was a flicker of relief there, but it was drowned in fear and uncertainty. "I don't know what to do, Dad," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I just don't want to feel so alone." I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The weight of his confession was like a tidal wave dragging me under. I felt the air leave my lungs, the room spinning just slightly as I tried to grasp the reality of what he had just said. Without a word, I pulled my hand back and stood abruptly. "No, woman," unable to mask the tremor in my voice. Just stay here, okay? His eyes widened, the glimmer of hope faltering as he watched me retreat. I hated the look on his face, the fear that maybe he'd said too much, but my chest felt too tight, my thoughts too jumbled. I turned and left the room, closing the door behind me. My heart pounded in my chest as I leaned against the hallway wall, staring at nothing. I needed to process this, to breathe, to think, to figure out what I could possibly say or do to help him. But what I didn't know was that his slightest confession would unravel into something far more complicated. Something that would test everything I thought I understood about being his father and myself. It had been almost a week since his mother left on her business trip, and each passing day seemed to tighten the unspoken bonds that had started to form between us. The tension between us was palpable, simmering beneath the surface like an unspoken promise. It wasn't just the way he looked at me anymore, or the lingering touch that seemed to linger longer than necessary. It was something deeper, something that we were both slowly beginning to acknowledge, even if we couldn't yet find the words to fully define it. The nights were the hardest without his mother there to break the quiet of our home. The two of us found ourselves drifting into patterns that were almost uncomfortably intimate. We would sit together in the living room with him sprawled out on the couch, his head resting against my shoulder as I absent-mindedly ran my fingers through his hair. Sometimes he would stay silent, his breath steady against me, and I would feel the gentle rhythm of his pulse beneath my hand. It was as though we had developed a new kind of connection, one built on an unspoken understanding, on an undercurrent of something forbidden yet undeniably magnetic. And then one particular evening, as the sun dipped low outside, painting the sky in hues of orange and red, I found myself standing in the kitchen, stirring a pot of tomato sauce. I was lost in thought, my mind still reeling from the day's work, when I sensed him behind me. His steps were soft and deliberate on the tiled floor. "Dad." His voice was soft, almost timid, but there was an underlying strength to it that always seemed to surprise me. I turned to face him, but my heart seemed to skip a beat at the sight of him standing there. His gaze was tender, searching as though he was trying to convey something that words couldn't fully capture. "Hey," I said, setting the spoon down and turning to face him. "What's on your mind?" He hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath before stepping closer. His hands were trembling slightly as they came to rest on my own. I could feel a spark of something between us, a heat that was building slowly, a current that seemed to pull us together with an undeniable force. It was as if every unspoken word, every glance that lingered longer than it should have, was leading up to this single moment. I've been thinking about how things have been between us," he began, his voice hitching. "It's been so different since Mom left, like I don't know. I can feel something changing, but I'm not sure what it means." I nodded slowly, swallowing hard as I took in the intensity of what he was saying. There was a weight to his words that I couldn't ignore, an electric current that seemed to spark each time he shifted closer. My own pulse quickened, and I found myself feeling an almost desperate urge to hold him, to make sense of the feelings that were swirling around us. "I feel it too," I whispered, feeling my heart twist with a mix of fear and longing. "I've been feeling it too." His eyes searched mine, full of uncertainty and something deeper, something that went beyond the usual father-son connection we had always shared. There was a quiet intensity in the way he was looking at me, and I could feel the air between us crackling with a new kind of energy. Without thinking, I reached out and brushed a lock of hair behind his ear. My touch lingered longer than it ever had before. His breath hitched at the contact, and for a long moment, we simply stood there, suspended in time, neither of us moving as if waiting for the other to make a move. And then, without warning, he took a small step forward, closing the distance between us. His lips brushed against mine, tentatively, almost as though he was testing the waters. My heart seemed to stop, every fiber of my being acutely aware of the overwhelming sensation that rippled through me. I closed my eyes, feeling the soft pressure of his mouth against mine, The unexpected tenderness that flowed like a current between us. It was a kiss that was long awaited, yet entirely unplanned. One that seemed to draw us into a new reality. A reality where the lines between father and son were blurred, where love had taken on a different shape, one that was fragile and raw. He pulled back slightly, his eyes searching mine for something, for any sign that I wasn't just as lost in this moment as he was. And in those silent seconds, I felt a rush of emotions flooding me. Love, confusion, fear, something else I couldn't quite name. But most of all, I felt a sense of relief, as though we were finally acknowledging what had been hanging between us all along. Then he kissed me again, this time deeper, more out of desire. I let it happen, and he drove me crazy. After a minute, he went even further than that. This was crazy, I knew that, but I just couldn't hold myself off. Of course, I can't go into detail, but I think you can imagine what we did. Thereafter, we were quiet for a moment, but after a long silence, he broke it. I wanted to do that for so long, he whispered, his voice trembling. I didn't know if I could. I reached out to him, my hands trembling as I cradled his face. It's okay, I whispered back, my own voice thick with emotion. I'm here, Noah. It's okay. And just like that, we gave into a connection that felt natural, even though it was wrong by societal standards. As I held him close, I didn't regret it. Days passed with a mix of comfort and tension, our bond growing stronger but unspoken. Our love became something we couldn't say out loud, but needed. With his mother's return turning soon, we agreed to keep things the same, yet each moment with him deepened what we shared. Our connection felt fragile, but real, and I found comfort in the secrecy. Often, I felt his touch in my dreams, a lingering sensation that I couldn't shake off, even when I woke up. It wasn't just in the quiet of the night, but also during moments when I least expected it. As I prepared dinner, he would purposefully brush his hand against my skin, his touch lingering just a little longer than necessary. Each time, a wave of warmth would wash over me, leaving me unsettled, yet craving more. The tension between us was undeniable, lingering in every glance, every brush of skin. We were caught in this strange rhythm, half love, half fear, needing each other more than I wanted to admit, but unable to pull away. It was late one night when everything came to a head. I had just finished putting away the dishes, the quiet hum of the house settling around me. I felt the familiar weight of exhaustion pressing on my shoulders, but there was something else, a pull, a feeling that I couldn't shake. As I turned off the light in the kitchen, I saw him standing in the hallway, his figure barely visible in the shadows. My heart raced, and I knew that this moment, this silent, lingering moment, was about to change everything. Dad, he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. We need to talk. His words hung in the air, and I could feel the weight of them sinking into my chest. There was no turning back from this. I knew it, and I think he did too. This was the moment where everything would either come crashing down, or for better or worse, take us deeper into uncharted territory. I nodded, my breath catching in my throat. I didn't trust myself to speak, not yet. I had no idea what to say. What could possibly be said when the world, as I knew it, was already starting to unravel? He stepped forward, closing the distance between us, and for a moment, all I could do was look at him. His eyes were filled with a strange mixture of longing and fear, like he knew that we were both on the brink of something irreversible. Dad, he said, his voice cracked, and the vulnerability in his words pierced me like a knife. I can't stop thinking about you. My breath caught in my chest. There it was, the unspoken truth we'd both been avoiding. The thing that had been quietly growing between us, taking root in the silence, was finally being brought to the surface. It was the truth that neither of us was ready for, but here we were, facing it head-on. I reached for him instinctively, my hands trembling as I pulled him into an embrace. I could feel his body pressed against mine, warm and solid, and for a fleeting moment, everything felt right. There was no guilt, no fear, just the pure, overwhelming need to hold him close, to feel him near me. And when he responded, his arms wrapping around me, pulling me tighter, I felt something shift, something that felt like the beginning of a storm. "I've never wanted anything more," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. I could feel the truth in every word I said, but at the same time, it felt like I was confessing to a crime I wasn't sure I committed but couldn't take back. His fingers dug into my back, pulling me even closer. His breath was shallow, his heart pounding against mine. The air between us crackled with electricity, and I could feel the weight of everything that had built up between us pressing down on us, threatening to overwhelm us both. "Then why have we been pretending?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Why are we pretending like nothing's wrong?" "I can't keep pretending, Dad." The question hung in the air, an accusation, but also a plea. I knew he was right. We had been pretending that things hadn't changed, pretending that our bond was still just a father-son relationship, but it wasn't anymore. It hadn't been for a long time, and now, standing here with him, feeling the heat of his body against mine, I knew that there was no going back. "I don't know," I murmured, my hands finding their way to his face, cupping it gently as I looked into his eyes. "I don't know how to fix this, Noah. I don't know if I want to." His lips parted slightly, and for a second, I thought he might say something else, something that would either shatter what little was left of our fragile world or pull us closer into it. But then, before I could react, he kissed me. It was slow at first, tentative, as though we were both unsure what the other might do, but soon it deepened. The kiss became more urgent, more desperate, as if neither of us could wait anymore, as though we had been holding our breath for too long and couldn't hold it in any longer. It was a kiss that spoke of everything we'd been hiding, everything we'd been feeling but couldn't express. And as I kissed him back, I realized something. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't afraid of what this would do to us, to our family. The only thing I was afraid of was letting this go. I pulled back from the kiss, my chest heaving as I looked at him. My hands were still trembling as they rested on his shoulders. His face was flushed, his lips swollen, and I saw the uncertainty in his eyes, the same uncertainty that mirrored my own. "We can't keep doing this," I whispered, though every fiber of my being wanted to say the opposite. I wanted to pull him back into my arms to make this moment last forever, but I knew we couldn't. Not like this, not with the world as it was. "Why not?" he asked softly, his voice barely audible. "Because," I began, swallowing hard. "Because we're crossing a line, Noah, and once we cross it, there's no going back. We can't go back to the way things were." For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of pain in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by something else, something stronger, something more determined. He stepped closer, closing the gap between us once again, his voice low and steady as he spoke. "I don't care about going back," he said. "I don't care about the lines we're crossing. All I care about is you, Dad. You're all I've ever wanted." Noah's words hit me like a ton of bricks, and I could feel my resolve weakening with each syllable. He was right. There was no going back. And part of me didn't want to. I had feelings for him, deeply buried as they were, but I knew all the reasons this was impossible. I tried to form the words, try to reason with him, but my own breath caught in my throat as he took another step forward. His breath was warm against my face, and his hand slid along the curve of my waist, settling just above my hips. His touch sent sparks of electricity through my body, setting my skin on fire. But just as I was about to surrender myself to the warmth of his touch, to the undeniable pull of his presence, we heard a car pull up outside, the familiar sound of his mother's car returning from her business trip. Time seemed to slow, and I felt the walls of our secret world start to close in on us. "We have to stop," I said, my voice cracking. "We have to stop now before she comes inside." He nodded, his eyes never leaving mine, and for a moment, we just stood there in the silence. Both of us knowing that the world outside that door would never be the same again. Our lives, our family, had just been irrevocably changed. And as his mother stepped through the door, I couldn't help but wonder what the future held for us. What would happen when everything came to light? What would become of the bond that had been growing between him and me? A bond neither of us had ever intended, but that neither of us could deny. I didn't know, but one thing was certain. We couldn't go back, not anymore. I still haven't told his mother about what I did with our son yet. Should I? Asterisk, if you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment below. Share your thoughts on this emotional journey. And if you have a story like this to share, we'd love to hear from you. Asterisk,